Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to my YouTube channel. We've been doing a series on React coding challenges and solving series of questions on it, and so we're going to continue with a to-do list application where we are tasked with creating a simple to-do list application using the React app. The application should allow us to add new tasks, mark tasks as completed, and delete tasks from the list. So when we think about functionalities, it has three basic functionality as stated here. And additionally, the tasks should also display total number of tasks and the number of completed tasks, I guess as a good follow-up. And so the we have some bullet points just emphasizing what we are supposed to do. We want to display an input field. Our app should typically have an input field and a button. Obviously, if we know we are to add new tasks, we want to delete task, which we want to display a list of tasks with a checkbox to check as completed and a delete button to remove that task from the list. Also, we want to display the total number of tasks that we have and the number of completed tasks. And finally, we want to implement the functionality to add tasks, mark as completed or deleted, basically repeating what we said, because once we've done all of this, the implication is that we have this functionality that does this. So let's dive right into the code. So this is a quick demo of something similar to what we are going to do. We're going to have the ability to add an item to our to-do list and check it off our to-do list. Of course, we are going to be able to delete and display a counter of completed and tasks that are not yet completed. I'll be bootstrapping this code using the React Code Sandbox. It's not peculiar to React, but codesandbox.io if you want to use that. So I'm going to use the DevBox tool, and the environment I'll be using is the React plus TypeScript environment. I'm going to call it, let's leave this as the default that is named by them, and I'll wait for that to boot up. This is up and running, and if you're familiar with Vite, you can see that under the hood, Code Sandbox uses Vite to bootstrap this application. If you don't understand it, that's fine. We won't be using it anyways. We'll be going into app.csx, clearing out the boilerplate code, and writing our own components. Awesome. So I've cleared out the boilerplate code from our app.csx. I've written a simple h1 tag to show that this functions as it ought to. And now we can start building out our app. So first I'm going to create a component and just call it to-do list.csx. I am going to copy over the boilerplate code for our app.txx so I don't have to type out everything, but you definitely can if you want to remove the import style. I'm going to be using the arrow function. So yeah, let's go ahead and define that. And also we want to export our to-do list. Awesome. Now I'm going to go ahead and actually import our to-do list app, remove this boilerplate code, and we should still have what we previously did, which is boilerplate code. So the first thing I want to do is to actually display a list of dummy tasks, just to have a bare bones of what my to do list should look like. So I'm going to create a state and call it random to dos sets. I think random to dos might be a bit too long, so I'm going to call it to dos. Set to dos. It's going to use states, and this is going to be an array of simple tasks. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that quickly. Now that we have some set of dummy to dos, I want to import use state. So Typescript sub screaming at us. That didn't work. So let's go ahead and type that out. Awesome. Now we're going to display our to-dos in our application, and we do that using the map function since we want to iterate over a list of things. So I'm going to use a list tag. It's just appropriate. So and in my list tag, I'm going to go ahead and map my items. Also, I'll be accessing the index. The index is going to be the position of the items in the array, and since they'll be unique, they are good enough to use as my key. Now this is to do's, not to do. So now we can see that we have our items being displayed in our playground. I'm just going to give some more space here. So we can see that we have our items being displayed. We're going to go over styling later on. We want to focus more on the functionality of our application. Now the next thing we want to do is to actually have a button and an input field whereby we can add a list. It's only right that that's the most basic thing that we do next. So I'm going to go up and define a form tag, actually, not a div. And in my form, I want to have an input field that says add item. So what is the value going to be? The value is definitely going to be a to do, and what triggers that value state. I'm just going to set this directly. I'm going to say that set to do, then update my to do based on the value. So basically we need a state to do, and we want to update it. So I'm going to go up here and define those states. I hope this is not so confusing. Set to do and then to do's. So one is a string and one is an array. What else do we need here? Obviously, we need our button that actually triggers the item. And our button should have the text add item, no styling yet, but it's going to be a type of submit. And on submit, I'm just going to go ahead and define and do input. This is not actually input, I'm going to submit. We already handled input here, so undo submit, and what is going to happen here is we are simply going to set to dos, add to dos into our to dos. So we're going to set to dos. So it's as simple. What we are basically doing is set to dos dot push to do, but this is a state and we need to update it properly. So push should not actually work, but I'm showing that under the wood we want to push our to do here that we imputed into our array of to dos. So what we'll be doing instead is we'll be using the callback function. We want to spread out items that we have previously, then want to go ahead and add our to do. So once I go to my item here, once we go to our playground, I want to enter a new item. I'm going to call it something wash, add item, and we can see that is added. Of course, our app reloads because we don't have the prevent default. Prevent default prevents this default behavior of the web to refresh after every submit. So I want to go ahead and add that. This is going to scream at us, so we need a form event. And we also know this is an HTML. Am I correct here? I'm waiting for it to pop out suggestion, so I click the correct thing. Okay, cool. Now let's also pass that in. Awesome. Now let's add an item again and ensure that that works. So don't let me type gibberish. Some task, add item, and we can see that that's added. Also, I want to clear out my to-do list, so I'm going to set that to now to do this time. I'm going to set it back to an empty string whenever we add an item. Also, before adding the item, I'm going to trim out any extra spaces. And before I actually trim it out, I want to show why I want to trim it out. Let me go ahead and refresh this actually. So once that's refreshed, we add a new item. If we add some space, we can see that our space, our empty string is being added to our array. So one of the first things I want to do is to actually trim out that space. And after trimming out that space, I want to ensure that I'm only adding items that is not equal to an empty string. So I'm going to say that if my to-do item, let me use, I was going to use the ternary operator, but I'm just going to use if statement here. So if to do is not equal to an empty string, I'm going to trigger set to do's. And the reason why we still have to do this is although we've already trimmed it, right? So it no longer shows up in our input field. I'm typing an empty space, you can't tell, but no longer shows up. Without the trim, it just shows up that empty string is being accepted. But if I click enter, you can see that empty string is still being added. So what we want to do is to ensure that our to do, if it's an empty string, is not being added. So if to do is an empty string, or if to do is not an empty string rather, then I want to trigger adding my to do to my list of arrays. So I'm going to refresh that, test again. So refresh, I'm going to type an actual item and then I'm going to I'm clicking on my keyboard. I don't know if you can hear it. And I'm also adding item and nothing is being added anymore. So that's done. Next, what I want to do is to actually check that okay, this item is completed. So what we want to do is go back to our list item and add a checkbox. So I'm going to add an input field here. It's going to be of type checkbox, and this should be inside the list item. So that's why it's throwing an error. I want it to be inside each list item so that each list has an input field, a checkbox input field. This should not be in curly braces either. This should just be a checkbox, a type of checkbox. Awesome, cool. So we can see that our boxes have this checkbox, and what we want to do is to actually check them when we click on them. So that, and there should be a visual marker. Right now the checkbox is not really doing anything, but we want to have a visual marker such that whenever I click on fold the laundry, it probably lines through fold the laundry to visually display to the user that the laundry has been folded. So let's give that a function. We're going to call it on click undo complete. Actually, I'm not passing an event here, so I'll make that empty. What I do want to pass is the index of the item that is being currently clicked. So let's go back to our function where we have our function undo complete. We expect index to be a type of number. So now that index is a type of number, what do we actually want to do here? So we want to set an ID, or yeah, we want to set an ID to what we've currently clicked, right? So when we click on walk the dog, for instance, we want to be able to know that we've clicked on walking the dog. So how do we do that? How I plan to do that is to just define an array that contains the IDs of all completed tasks. So we're going to call this completed and set completed. And it's going to be initially empty, but it's going to be an array of numbers. So what we want to do here is similarly to how we pushed items to this array, want to set completed. We're getting use a callback function to get everything that we have in set completed previously. Right now there is nothing, but there would be at some point. So we set previous, or rather we spread everything we have previously, and then we add the index that we are currently passing in. And now what we want to do is I'm going to go to my class and say that, you know what, when if completed, so if completed as the index that we currently clicked, then we want to give it a class of task completed. Otherwise, we don't want to give it a class. So what we're checking here is that whenever we are on any item, we want to check that the index that we are currently clicking is included in our completed tasks. Remember that when we trigger undo complete, we click on a checkbox. What we are doing is we are adding that index to an array of completed tasks. And now we are checking for every list. We're checking if this current ID is in that array of completed tasks. If it is, we want to give it a class of tasks completed. So I'm going to go to my app.css. I'm going to call task completed. I'm going to text decoration and give that a line through, not double, but a line through. Cool. There are many better ways to style this, obviously. So now we can see that when our checkbox is clicked, there is a visual marker to show that it is clicked. But now we can also see an error where we decide that, oh, this task is actually not completed. I made a mistake, but the marker doesn't go. So let's go ahead and fix that such that when we click on the marker, we no longer see this visual line through, and we only see the visual line through when our checkbox is actually checked. So let's go back to undo complete, and now we want to check if the index that we're clicking on is in our completed ID. If it's in our IDs of completed tasks, then obviously we want to remove that. So we're going to use the filter method to remove it. So first we access what we have previously in our set completed, and on this array we are going to be using the filter function, and we're trying to get the item. For each item, we're just going to filter out whichever one matches the current index that we are on. And so if we already have the index in our array, we want to remove it. Otherwise, we want to add it to our array. So now when we save this, go back to our playground and test, we see that that visual marker is gone. Fold the laundry. Now we want to decide, okay, it's actually completed. Let's say, oh, we've not completed any of these tasks, and now it works as it ought to. The next thing that we want to do now is to add a delete button to our items. So I'm going to go ahead and install React icon. I think it's React icons, not icon, just to be clear. So once that is installed, there was this prompt of installing React icon. I don't know if you caught it. I'm going to navigate to React icons and look for something similar to what I want. Okay, this seems like a simple one to use. Copy it over. Okay, cool. I want to go ahead and use that in our code. Let's be sure. Cool. So let's go back to our code. Just after checkbox, I'm going to have a button, and this button is going to be used to wrap our icon from React icons. Now we also want to have an on-click function similar to what we've been doing. The on-click function will be on our button, similar to what we've been doing so far, and then it's going to undo delete, and we're passing in our index. Let's save that to be sure that our button is showing up. Okay, cool. Just some lag in the network, but we can see that our delete icon shows up as it should, and now we're getting this prompt that undo delete doesn't exist, which doesn't. But just in a moment, we are going to create undo delete. Then we're going to write our function that takes index as the argument. And basically, we are going to be doing the same thing, well, similar to the same thing that we did for sets completed. We'll filter through our sets completed list, but in this instance, we'll be filtering through our set to dos. Completed is it's just a list of items or a list of indexes, but this time we actually want to filter through the entire list. So we're going to be using set to dos. Now, our set to dos actually as the item and then the index, right? If you recall from how we are looping over our to dos here, we have the item and the index. The index is matching the index of whatever tool we have. Not that we have an index actually defined, so that's actually coming from the code behind the scene. What we actually have access to is the item. Yeah. So we are going to be using the item and then the index, and then we are going to be removing the item whose index matches our current index. All right, so I've replaced index or changed the spelling of index to idx, so Typescript stops scrolling at us so much. And now when we delete any of these items, we can basically say that they are deleted from our items. So I'm just going to create a couple of items again in our to-do list. 5 and 6, and basically we can check off 3, delete 3, check off 2, delete 2. But we can see a problem here, right? So basically, when we check off an item and delete the item, the index of that item is still in our completed list. And so the current item 5, for instance, move over to the index of 2, and since index is still completed, now it has this check mark of being completed. Let me refresh again and explain succinctly what this bug is. So we have clean the chairs, which has an index of 0, fold the laundry index of 1, walk the dog as an index of 2. So if I check off fold the laundry, which has an index of 1, that index is then added to our completed array. basically shows that okay, one is part of the tasks that we've completed. Once I check that off, one is still in this array. However, two, walk the dog, which previously has had an index of two, now has an index of one. And although it is not completed, because that index is still in the array, then it is marked as completed. So when we delete, we also want to make sure that we remove that particular index from our completed array. And item is not going to be used because it is literally the item, and we don't need the item. In this case, we just need the index. I'm going to use the Typescript underscore, so Typescript can ignore that one deliberately. So once we are deleting, we also want to remove that index from our completed array. It's actually very similar to what we have here, so I'm going to copy that over. You can type it out if you do not mind. Cool. I'm going to save that, refresh once more. Now, once we check off an item, we delete. Now, the item is checked off, but we can see that our check button is still active. And so we want to make sure that that is not the case. So we want an item to only be checked if it is included in our completed array. So let's save this, and we can see that that is no longer checked. So checked is dependent on if that item is actually being completed in our array. So let's once more add some new items. Clean the fridge. There also seems to be a problem here where we can no longer use the space, which we'll address in a bit. So click on an item, delete the item. Let's click on fold the laundry, delete fold the laundry. Now that's deleted. We no longer have the problem of an item staying in our completed list. Now to the last feature that this challenge really requires, which is returning the number of total tasks and number of completed tasks. Just after our list, I'm going to have two p tags, call this total tasks, and then completed tasks. Now, our total task is basically going to be the length of all our to-dos. We already have our to-dos, so that should be as easy as going to-dos dot length. And our completed tasks should be likewise. We have our completed arrays, so we can go back here and give that completed dot length. Let's give that a quick save, and we can see that our total tasks is 2, our completed tasks is 0. Let me add something else. Our total tasks keeps increasing as we increase our tasks. It decreases as we delete tasks, and our completed tasks also increases, and when we delete them, they update accordingly. And now to fix the error where we can no longer add space in between words. For instance, clean the fridge. I'm typing space, but nothing just shows, which is obviously as a result of this. We can now go back and fix this. First, I'm going to check off these items that are not needed, delete them from what we currently have, remove this trim. We do not want to trim right as we type anymore, we can see an obvious flaw with that. So instead, we are just going to trim it at this point where we want to add it to our array. And that is we're going to be checking for that item now that we are trimming, and we'll be adding that into our list. So if I go back now to my playground, I'm going to do a quick refresh, type an item, and just literally type an item. We can see that now we can add spaces between our words, add an item that's added. When we type, we can see spaces, but when we enter, it's not saved to our array, which we do not want. So we're going to put some other things, jump the loop, up, and just basically fix the tab. And we can see that basically we can add spaces on our to-do list work. I can check that off, see that the count is being updated appropriately, delete the count, and we are fine. Yeah, so that is all for the scope of this question, though I think that I want to extend it a bit more. For instance, I typed fix the tab instead of fix the tab. Rather than deleting and typing again, there should be an easy way to just double click or click on an edit button and type. Also, now that I'm done with the basic functionality, I'm going to style. But before I style, I want to extract this giant component into separate components. So the form is going to be extracted into a separate to-do form, into a to-do input. The list is going to remain in this component to-do input, and I'm going to extract all of the functions into the app state. So the parent component has control and can pass down all of these state and props as children to-do list. This just helps as our app grows. It helps to pass data from parents to children as the app grows, rather than having everything in one giant component. So that is what we'll be doing next, and then also adding the styles. So I've gone in and added some style to our checkbox. I did this off camera because I want it to be, well, because it's not like it's that impressive. So you can customize this however way that you want. I replaced the add text with the icon from React Icons. We already saw how to do that after installing React Icons. I increased the padding of the input field. I gave each list item a border bottom of 1 pixel solid. I moved the checkbox from being next to the delete button to being next to the item, because we know that that's typically how it looks like. And also the delete button just gave them some space, and that's all really. Oh, and I used a flex for our total tasks and completed tasks. It was a grid before, the default way that the website shows up on web, the default styling for p tags, and I just made that a flex, and basically that's all we have. So yeah, so the styling is completely optional. Customize it however we want. I'm sure yours is going to be better. Now for the final task that I want to do in this video, I want to separate out this component, like I said, to have the parents pass down the props and undo all of the state and functions. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder and call it to do input. And to do input is going to house our input field. So that's created. I'm going to create that function, call it to do input, and also export a default of to do input. Let's also not forget to return our function. So I'll go back to our list. We have our form here. So I'm going to copy out that form, paste it in our to do input. We can expect that our app starts to scream at us. So it says to do input is declared, but its value is never read. But we obviously know that that's not true. We're exporting it here. So I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not sure whether this is an issue from Typescript just screaming at us, or it's the compilation not working as it should yet. So we're expecting to do and set to do as a prop. So I'm going to go ahead and define that as a prop. So we have set to do and we also have to do. I'll go to our app and import to do input. So to do input, that will be imported from to do input. Also be sure to pass that in as to do input. Next, we know that to do input, we also have undo submit. Cool. Undo submit. Of course, let's not forget our icon. So I'm going to cut that icon and copy it over to the appropriate component. Cool. So we expect our to do, our set to do, our undo submit. We expect that as a prop. So we'll go in here and define them since we expect them, and also our undo submit. We do not have all of this currently, so let's go back to our to-do list and copy those over. So now we're extracting that state into our parent component, and we also want to define our undo submit here. Define that function. Cool. And from our undo submit, we can also see that we have a new problem where set to do's, the array of to do's is not being defined. But first, I'm going to import use state. Now, this step is completely optional, but I like to separate out several components when it starts to become a giant component, because the point of having of using React is to separate out components as much as we possibly can. And so when we start to have a giant component with possibility to scale, I prefer to just separate it out. It makes it cleaner to read and understand. So I'll go here and pass in the required argument, submit. Also set to do's, we need to bring set to do's in. So bring set to do's in to our app.csx. And now to do's is not being used. So we want to go in here and bring in all of these functions. We're going to be passing them into the child component and defining them in the parent component. Also set completed, bring that in here. And also we do not need use state, so TypeScript stop screaming at us. Let's remove use state. So now we have a simple to-do list that all it does, it is renders a to-do list. But of course there are some noise. We don't have to-dos yet, we don't have completed. What else do we need? We do not have undo complete function, undo delete function. What else do we need here? It seems as though that is all. So let's go in and pass in our to-dos to our to-do list. So we're passing in our to-dos, undo delete, undo complete, passing that function in. Same thing with undo delete. Completed, we also need completed. In fact, it should tell us that we need completed. Cool. So we also need completed. Cool. That looks good. Let's refresh our app. Cool. So that's loaded up. We can see our input field, our button, our default to do items, our total tasks completed. So I'm going to check for the laundry, delete that. I'm going to add a new item, add another item. I don't want to add gibberish. I'm going to check those off. We have three completed tasks as we can see in our completed task. I'm going to uncheck read. I'm going to delete them and we can see everything works as they should. Finally, we have TypeScript screaming at us for type. So I'm going to go in here and define the types of the props that is to be expected. So to do is an array of string, completed is an array of numbers, undo complete is a function that takes in index as a value. Just going to call that. Well, let me leave that index. The value is number, and we also have something similar for undo delete. I'm going to make this undo delete. I think that also accepts a type of number. Yes, it does. So we're going to go ahead and give that a type, and all is well with the world again. Next, let's go to our to do input and also define that. To do input. To do is a type of string. Set to do is a function that takes in a value of e is a type of string. Undo submit. So undo submit also takes in a value of e, and it is a function also. So E is interesting. E is a type of form element. Let's see. I typically type this and hope that I'm going to get the auto auto suggest, but doesn't seem like I'll get it in this case. Is it form element? I know it's very similar, so I'm just going to check if we have something like that or form event, right? Form event, HTML form element. Okay, HTML is in all caps. Cool. And we can go ahead and assign that types. And again, everything is right with the world. So our code functions as it should, and we have a cleanly extracted code. Can't say the same for our app.css, but each component has a clearly defined purpose. All this does is it returns the list, and the functions is abstracted in the parent component. In case we need undo delete in some other component, we can just as easily pass that down as a child prop. Our input field does that, just accepts input. And I think this is a solid intermediate level because it tests a bunch of stuff. Actually, it is very confusing, and let me know what you think. I think that the bare bones of this, we could ask a basic question like, oh, I just simply add an item to a to-do list. And that's a simple beginner question. But there are other complexities like edit, delete, checkbox, remove all these states that start to feel like an intermediate level. And there are even times where we start to watch for keyboard events that makes this even an advanced level. So I think that to do input is a very good practice, even for you personally, to learn some tests and ask yourself some questions. Oh, why is this a type of void? Why do we have to, if you recall, we when we were pushing our items into our to-do list, this is an array, right? Why are we using Why are we accessing previous? Why can't we just simply do set to do's dot push, right? These are really great questions that you do not just have to code mindlessly. You have to answer as you work towards a resolution of this problem. I really hope you truly enjoyed and learned something new. I'll see you in the next video. Kindly subscribe if you found any value in this. Thank you so much. Bye. Hi guys, so editing Blossom here. I noticed a bug while editing that has to be addressed. So I'm going to reload that. We click on for the laundry, we complete walk the dog, but you notice something really interesting. When we delete for the laundry, walk the dog is no longer checked, is no longer completed, and completed tasks is one. So what is happening here is, if you recall, we are removing the index of the deleted item. So for instance, fold the laundry is at index 1. Once it's deleted, then we also want to remove the index from our completed array, right? But what now happens is walk the dog is no longer index 2, is now index 1. Now, since its index is no longer in the completed array, that visual marker that shows that it's completed is gone, but index 2 is still in our completed task. So completed task still shows up as 1. Now, that's a really interesting bug. Phew. Anyways, so the solution to this is, eventually we are going to have to give our items a unique we're going to give them a unique ID. I'm thinking using either the names of the to do itself. So rather than numbers, we are using clean the chairs as the ID, since we might not necessarily want to add clean the chair twice to our array. It already exists. Or we might just have to have a separate key object that is unique. However, I'll not be doing this in this video. This video is already too long, but you can watch out somewhere on the screen or in the description. I'll definitely link the solution to this bug.